What's up, guys? Welcome to the Evergreen Real Estate Podcast, where we're inspiring growth in the lives of real estate investors. We just got off of a conversation with Mr. Isaac Phillips. He really inspired me, just like where he came from. You know, he was a missionary kid in Haiti. At one point, he was like living in the streets of Haiti, and where he is today, now managing like a multi-million-dollar real estate portfolio. It's just crazy what's possible. And the big thing that he was saying was just do the work. A lot of people don't know what it's like to just go through that and work hard and stick to it and persevere with it. He inspired me. I was just like, man, I want to go out there and do the thing now, just get to work.
Dude, it's so true. His whole thing with like everybody wants to pay off, but nobody wants to be part of the process. Like his story is ridiculous. He's seen some crazy stuff too. You wouldn't think it. He looks like your garden variety white privilege.
He just looks like a normal dude. Yeah, he's just like, he's an undercover beast. When you guys are listening, listen to what he says about 168 hours and just some of the principles there, and how we're all given the same amount of time, but it's what you do with those hours. It's what you do with that time that really counts, and everyone's given the same thing. So listen out for that. It was a really great conversation.
Yeah, and it's been about clarity too. Like he has this ridiculous gig where he's managing $35 million worth of assets for another guy, and he basically attributes getting the job to having absolute clarity on the intended outcome he wanted. So ton of great lessons.
Values too, not just going into a conversation with somebody and having it be a transactional thing. He talks about adding value to people, spending 30 minutes on a cold call with a potential owner. And it's not about just trying to get something out of the other guy. It's about trying to add value. And he talks about how that mindset is what got him where he is today. So listen for that as well. So without further ado, Mr. Isaac Phillips.
Well, Michael, dude, I'm excited because this isn't just like a normal podcast guest. This is actually a dear friend of mine and future business partner. We're in a mastermind group together, and we rub elbows with some guys that do enormous things in multifamily real estate. And Isaac, no doubt, is a rock star and a shooting star in his own right. So he's actually the director of operations and runs the business day to day, manages like 7 or 8 full-time people, and he manages a blended portfolio of about $35 million in 200 units or so. It consists of 60% industrial and commercial real estate and 40% residential. The guy's wicked smart, super left brain, but like a big hearted guy. I had the pleasure of having his wife and family over for dinner. And he's just one of those dudes that sort of becomes a bro really fast. And so I'm honored, Isaac, to have you on as a guest, and kind of looking forward to the next hour or so that we get to spend together. And so welcome.
Hey, thank you for the intro and the welcome. I really appreciate it. It was great spending time with you guys and meeting the rest of the family on Monday. So thanks again for the hospitality there.
Yeah, for sure. So in our fireside conversations, when your kids were peeing in my hot tub, you had made
I'm jealous.
You had made a statement. It kind of resonated with me because I feel similarly, and probably a lot of men in general. But you have a specific interest in education and sort of re-engineering what education should be, and really some of the ways that our school system is failing our young ones, and how that sort of applies to the real world, particularly with financial management. And you also have an interesting backstory, the way you were raised and your education and that sort of thing. So I just kind of wanted to throw it back in your direction. Like, talk to me about sort of your bringing up and why that is a unique thing that you're passionate about, is this whole idea of actual financial literacy as a point of education.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. So yeah, I grew up as a missionary's kid in Haiti from 1991 to 2001, or 8 to 18 for me, right? So my family went over in 91, all of us there. We ended up with 7 kids total, plus our parents. So homeschooled over there. Came back in 2001 when I was 18, and then my family eventually came back in 2005 for good. So nobody's over there anymore. But from 8 to 18, that was my life. So came back once during 97. I was like 14 years old, and spent about 6 months or so here as a furlough kind of before we went back and recommitted for the rest of the time there. So going from a country that's third world, I mean, that defines third world, the epitome of third world, right? Nothing goes right there. You have no running water, no electricity, all these types of different things. And most of the environments that we're in, we did not have those. Like we'd have a generator that we would fire up, and we would do laundry through a wringer washer. or something like that, but it was not at all like what we have here. So for the first 6 years or so while I was there, I didn't know what I was missing out on. And I didn't have anything to compare it to. I went over when I was 8, and it became my normal, and I enjoyed it. And I could read Creole, write it, speak it as fluent as any Haitian. I could tell dirty jokes with the rest of them, and it never had a bit of accent, man. But I came back at 14 in 97, and I had a different perspective when I went back. So when I went back, now I had something to compare it to. I could say, hey, all these kids at 14 are mowing yards for money. They got mountain bikes. They got Super Nintendos, they have all these different things. Now I had something to compare to contrast that. So I went back kind of jaded, to Haiti for the rest of that time. And then little did I know from there on out, due to some personal choices of my own, as well as environment, family life and Haiti as a whole, I ended up living on my own on the street in Haiti, had an apartment at about 13, 14 years old for a short period of time. And then I wound up in foster care for the remainder of my 4 years of childhood. So foster care in a third world country, horrible situation overall, but it could have been way worse. And I was really blessed that I wound up where I did, and ultimately blessed that I came back alive from Haiti when it was all said and done, and still had family relationships to rebuild from there, because it could have been ended totally differently. But so take that as contrast, right? That's the 5-minute synopsis. Came back in 2001, my parents spent 90 days here or so, got me on my feet, set me up with a apartment above a gym at a church where I was responsible to do janitorial duties in exchange for my room there. And then they went back to Haiti. So I didn't go very much smoother than Haiti did in that regards, right? It was a rough transition and a culture clash going from the environment that I'd come from to PlayStation 2s, credit cards, and all these other different things. Plus, I'm trying to work my way through school. I had 2 full-time jobs and was trying to go to school full time at the same time. So that didn't go too well. It lasted about 6 months before I realized I couldn't do all of it. And so if you take all that, telling you that just to tell you this, that I learned everything the hard way. Financial literacy was not easy. I didn't know anything about it. I had to learn it all the hard way. And that consisted of a little more living on the street, out of my car rather, or out of my office of the video game store that I managed at the time, and doing stuff like that. So I learned it all the hard way, found Dave Ramsey about halfway through my stupid cycle coming up in financial literacy. And I was like, man, this would have been great had I known it sooner. But then I'm a quick student. So I took it and ran with it and learned budgeting and all that type of stuff. And I was like, man, there's got to be more to life than Dave Ramsey, right? That's a really myopic perspective on finance. And it's more or less a kindergarten degree in financial literacy, but you really can take it so much farther. So I outgrew that quickly. But I still teach financial literacy through his program. I've taught several classes now in Omaha and other states that I've lived along the way, teaching other people the basics of financial literacy. Because if you don't understand the basics as he teaches them, you're never going to be able to do stuff that's more complicated, or the stuff that we do now, where we're just talking about good debt that would make him turn over. There's no such thing for Dave Ramsey, right? So, yeah, I think that our system, we take these students and we take them out of the high school environment and we send them out into the real world. And as soon as you show up on a college campus, you have people advertising credit cards to you and giving you a T-shirt to sign up for a visa and stuff like that. And you have no clue. The majority of the people, their parents didn't do that great a job bringing them up in financial literacy. They don't understand what it looks like. They don't have any intentions necessarily of learning because they don't realize the gap that's there. And so they hop on this hedonic treadmill that we're all pre-programmed on, go to school, get a degree, go get a good job, blah, blah, blah. And oh, by the way, as you go along, you just signed up for 84 months of a car loan and a 30-year note on your mortgage, and a student loan balloon that's going to drag behind you like a parasail for the next 20 years to the tune of a couple $100,000. And then you wonder why we have a midlife crisis, right? At some point you waking up and you're like, man, this sucks. And I'm working for something that I've already had for the next 8 years. Like my money's already spent before I ever earned it. Mm-hmm. So then what happens, unfortunately, is life smacks us around a little bit and you realize that you have no bandwidth at all and you don't have any room to absorb that stuff. So I think that we do a huge disservice to our youth as we bring them up. We don't show them what financial literacy looks like. We don't show them how to set goals and work hard for it. Instead, we want to take away that effort. We want things to be easy for them. So when they come out of school, mom and dad gave them everything. They don't know anything about financial literacy and they think the world owes them everything they ever wanted. And if you dream it, you can have it. So
Isaac, can I just stop you there? Just jump in.
Yeah.
One, what you're talking about is something specific that, who was I talking to about? I was talking to somebody about it. I think a guy in my church. We're talking about just the notion of, that's what I heard a sermon. Matt Chandler, he was saying, he's like, don't coddle your kids. Like, let your kids struggle. Let them go through some stuff. That's where you build character, and if you don't go through that, if everything is kind of, let me figure it out. Make sure you do this, you do that, you brush your teeth, you eat your vegetables. Like we have to take care of our children, But when we insulate them from the natural life process of that pruning process where you go through stuff, the gentleman we had on our last show, we illustrated, just he told us his whole story, and it's this like pain, payoff, pain, payoff, pain, payoff sort of cycle. And when you go through that stuff, I'm just listening to your story, I had no idea that it was that that much history behind your story. Now that I hear that, I'm like, makes a lot of sense. You know, you put yourself in a position where you've lived on the street, you've been in foster care, you have no problem experiencing that hardship. And then through that, it forms that character. It makes you to where you're not afraid to take the risks, and you're not afraid to do the work. And that's the thing that I think a lot of people our age, they don't want to do the work. You know, they're like, oh, if it's not easy, they give up, you know, and doing the work is where that's where it happens, right? That's where the magic happens, doing the work. So you have to be willing to experience that pain. And as a parent, that's what started this whole thing. When I want to jump in as a parent, don't insulate your kids from that. Let them experience that a little bit, protect them, but let them go out on a little bit of a leash, have some of that, those experiences.
Dude, and it's so difficult, man, because as a parent, you want to give them everything that they desire, especially it's at least, you know, maybe not all parents, but for me, it's been a struggle because I did have it so hard at times. And it's like, you know, you don't want that pendulum to swing the other direction. What was that whole thing? Like, strong men create good times, and good times create weak men, and weak men create bad times.
That's a good one.
Cycle of like softness creates bad times. So anyway, that was a lot, Isaac. I'll throw it back to you to kind of respond to Michael's thoughts.
No, you're 100% correct. So now, being a parent myself, I also recognize the fallacy of that, and I understand how we got to where we're at by good intentions, right? So my parents had great intentions. Every parent has great intentions for the most part. And then, like you said, we want to make it where our kids have it better than we did, right? So what does that look like? Well, that means that I want to remove the struggle. I certainly don't want my kids to be homeless like I was, or I don't want them to live on the street or whatever. But at the same time, all those situations that we go through coming up through difficult things, they make us who we are, and they give you that tenacity, that resiliency, that ability to push past the suck and just, you know, push to the breaking point on the other side. So how then, as a parent, are you supposed to pass that resiliency and all that experience, life experience, onto your kids, especially if you want to remove all that and make it better than you had it? So as a parent, I'm constantly struggling. Okay, well, how do I let Gavin and Jordan learn things and learn that they're going to get smacked down sometimes? Then guess what? You have to dust yourself off and get back up, and nobody wants to hear you cry about it either. That's just life. That's how it works, right? But you have to take care of them at the same time. You have to provide them. You have to do that in a sheltered environment, like you said. And as parents, it's hard to do that. Like, where do you draw that line? It's a very dynamic line on a day-to-day basis, and you have to be sensitive to their needs as well. So my struggle as a parent is I want them to have everything that I have inside, all the stuff that I went through that put me to where I'm at. I want them to be there, but I don't want them to get it the same way that I did. I want them to have that through a more constructive approach. So I think as parents, what we do is we typically try to make it better. And we don't want them to have to go through all that stuff. And that's understandable. And that's a good intention. But then by handing them everything, they've worked for nothing. And they've never struggled. They've never failed. And you told them that their dreams, just by dreaming, they can be the president. They'll be there. Oh, if you dream it, you can achieve it. And it's like, well, yeah, a dream minus actions is nothing. It's just setting you up for failure. So then we missed the action part because they never had to work for anything. And we didn't let them struggle. And so you put all those things together, and then we wonder why we have what we have now, where, you know, people are looking down at the generation saying, man, what a bunch of entitled people, and they can't do this and they can't do that. But we created it, right? So my whole point being that our educational system is not setting us up for success. And secondly, if you want to be a high achiever and you don't want to live the traditional path of that hedonic treadmill that I mentioned, then the educational system is not going to serve you anyways. For the most part. I'm not saying there's not value there. I struggled and I paid a lot of hard-earned money and time to get my degree, and I think it was valuable and it's served me well.
Isaac, what's your degree in? What's your education in?
Business operations management.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So I just got the degree to go with the experience that I already had to make myself more marketable. And it's really just a conversation starter. It opens doors. It gets you to tables and conversations that you would not be allowed to otherwise without the degree. That's the society that we're in now. So
yeah.
But I think that
you're utilizing it day to day. I mean, it wasn't just a conversation starter. You're actively utilizing exactly what you studied.
Absolutely.
Kind of rare.
Absolutely. So some of the papers and stuff that I did along the way through college, though, showed during research into financial literacy and everything else that over 40%, 45% of the people that go to college do not ever use, they're never employed in the field that their degree is in.
Yep.
And they may never actually use it at all. And oh, by the way, they still have the college debt and everything that goes behind it, right? So I just think that we're not intentional enough in figuring out what it is that we want to do and what we actually need to get there. And then if you're trying to do something that's not traditional, then don't expect the traditional educational system to serve you at all, because it's designed to create a widget that bumps into a factory and creates the same cycle over and over. And if that's you, then there's nothing wrong with that. But if that's not your goal, then don't expect to come out of college with everything that you need to have a non-traditional outcome. It's designed to give you a traditional outcome at best. That's your.
I would imagine that all three of us at some point was probably accused of either being too energetic, ADHD, or named the host of things.
Yes.
That don't work.
Yes.
Definitely too energetic. I've heard that 1,000 times.
And especially coming from, I also came from a homeschool background. Actually, I think we all did at one point, a homeschool sort of background. And not growing up in that structure where you're supposed to this class, that class, do this thing. Then you come out, you have to go to college, and then you have to okay, I have to sit here. And then you go to the corporate world. I'm an assistant nurse manager, so I gotta sit there. I gotta make sure I'm doing the right stuff and not and my brain and my tendencies, I want to go out there and do these things, but there's this thing, there's energy, that we all have. And it's, the good thing about it is I've been able to use my degree for, I've been able to establish myself and provide for the family that way. But it's the same as you hit a ceiling, you can go so far with it until you either have to go for higher education or do something else. And so I started investing in real estate because it just makes more sense. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think you can bash on college either. I think that it's needed, right? So we need doctors. We need all these different fields. Those people are needed. And so you can't bash on the educational system as a whole and say that it's not needed. It is needed. But if you're someone who's aspiring for different things, then you just have to know. And then back to that cycle that we were saying that we're in with our kids, if they never fail, half the reasons that I know where I'm at is where I want to be is because I've tried other things that didn't work. And so you learn through evolution, right? You learn, you try something, you realize that's not you. I initially went to school for computer programming. I am not nerdy enough to sit behind a monitor and search for that misplaced comma in 5-page programming language. I'll throw the monitor out the window.
Yeah.
But I would have never known had I not tried.
Right.
So if you don't go out there and try things and fail at them, how are you supposed to figure out? I mean, you take a 16-year-old and you tell them, hey, figure out what you're going to do for the rest of your life. They're like, dude, what the hell?
Yeah,
you need some internships and stuff like that. And you go out there and you try and you realize, hey, I don't want to be a plumber. Or maybe I don't want to be this, or I don't want to be a doctor or whatever. But you have to go through those processes to learn it. So I think education is needed. It's not needed for everything. It's not needed for everyone as far as further education. And we need the plumbers and the electricians and all that. And there's people that love doing that, and they own a nice business. They do really well for themselves. But for someone like ourselves who are shooting for non-traditional goals and have high ambitions and stuff like that, then you should look at non-traditional methods to get there.
One thing, I'm trying to figure out. So Dave Ramsey, you're in your 20s, you're figuring out life. It's been a rough journey for you. You find Dave Ramsey and financial literacy starts to ring true with you. Take me through sort of that part of your life and at what point does real estate become part of the equation for you? Because I don't know a ton about Dave Ramsey. I know that I understand it at a simplistic level, stay out
Don't go into debt. That's it.
Yeah. Don't spend more, but basically don't spend more than you make and be intentional with your finances, and all debt is bad, more or less. Yeah.
So where does real estate come into play in your life in your 20s here?
Yeah, so I wound up being a landlord by default when I left North Carolina. I lived in North Carolina for a long time, owned a home there. I bought at the end of the market in 2008, so the great market, super high prices. Bought it and then moved to Omaha, Nebraska for work. And it's like, man, I'm going to take at least a 25% beating. It was 2010 when I made the move, spring of 2011. It was a soft market. I was like, I'm going to take a huge beating and have to pay out of pocket to get out of this thing. And I just don't see doing that. So I moved and I put the property in as a rental, rented out. And so I kept it as a rental all the way up to 2015. So 5 or 6 years. And
can we talk about your numbers on that real quick? I just want to know where
they sucked. Let me tell you how bad my numbers were. My numbers were so bad that if everything went right, I only had to pay $55 to make my mortgage payment. There was no making money out of that deal, right? There was no money setting aside for CapEx, and there was none of the stuff that I know now.
Okay. And that was for 5 years that you were in that sort of lull, right?
5 years, yep.
Wow.
So I had one tenant in there the whole time, which was awesome. And then I was like, hey, man, they love the house, and I'll just sell it to them. But I realized really quickly they wanted to be tenants. They didn't want to be homeowners. So I ended up having to take it to the market. And so I went back, and 2015, after my son was born. Literally, he wasn't 90 days old. And my father-in-law and I drove to North Carolina and painted the house, redid all the flooring and everything else, got everything ready and threw it on the market. I think it was November, I had closed on it 6 months later, and I'd gotten all the money that I had in it back out. So I didn't lose anything at all. Didn't make anything either, but I learned a lot in the process. I loved the tax write-offs. I loved the fact that whenever I went home to see my folks, I could fly into Raleigh-Durham, grab a nice convertible, stop by the house, drop off a Christmas card for my tenants, and write the whole trip off of my taxes in the process. And so there were things from that in the back that had started the wheels turning for me mentally.
Dude, let me throw one thought in here, and then I'll throw it back to you.
Yeah.
Because that whole stretch, I mean, that was quite a shite show from 06 to whatever 2010. Yeah. And I feel some personal pain just hearing you talk about your story, because, dude, I did the same thing. I bought a house in 05, 06, and we were completely underwater when the market turned upside down. And I had friends at the time, and this isn't coming from judgment. This is just simply sharing experience, because I lived this at the same time that you did. I had friends that just handed the keys to the lender and walked away and willingly foreclosed. And 3 years later, they're buying brand new houses. And there I was in this house, like in the ghetto, more or less, that I was underwater in, and I had cash in, and basically just had to wait it out for 5, 6, 7. I think we were there for 7 years. I didn't want to wreck my credit. And there was some values in me that didn't want to just like let the house go. But, you know, at the time, I went through some really difficult times asking myself why I was doing this, when everyone was either doing short sales, or they were letting it go to foreclosure, or they were wrecking their credit, renegotiating, like, minimized payoffs and less balances and that sort of thing. So, like, in some sort of way, I actually commend you for staking it out, because you didn't have to. You actually had other options, but you chose to kind of stick to what you had agreed to. And there's a lot of people that didn't.
Right. Yeah. Great point there. I think we all had different options, right? So I skipped over a lot of stuff along the ways there, but there were several times that I could have done the easy route, whether it was bankruptcy or whatever, and I chose not to. And I think, like you said, it's a values thing, and it's no judgment towards anybody else. But a lot of times you miss the learning lessons when you avoid the consequences. When you actually take the consequences, you will learn that lesson. And if you shirk those consequences, you will not learn that lesson. You will be back there again at another date and time, and it will bite you harder than it would have the first time. So I think there's a
that's wisdom, Isaac. I love that, man. That's business, that's relationships, that's work, that's life, man. Like you're gonna be here until you learn the lesson, and then you won't get here until you pass this test. Correct. It's the same way in school. It's the same way in business. Everywhere. If you have a bad relationship with somebody and you have this dynamic or whatever, until you fix there's some things, and you can't control another person, right? But you can control what you do. And once you learn, okay, I have this tendency, I got to work on this. Like my wife and I had to figure out what are my issues? What's causing this? What am I doing to cause this? And once you figure that out, good, then you can move on to the next lesson, and and you get a little further. And I love that profundity there, Isaac. That was good.
Thanks. No, it's just something I had to learn the hard way. But I had the same thing, and everybody has that, right? But we have, as a tendency, we're in a microwave society where we want instant gratification, instant results, and everybody's looking for that shortcut. The only shortcut to life is to learn from others' mistakes. That's the only shortcut to life.
Yes.
Everything else
you're speaking my language, Isaac. Yes. Yeah. Yes.
And I didn't do that, right? I didn't have other people showing me their mistakes, so I learned them firsthand, and that set me back a decade or more. But I mean, you can overcome that stuff. The other part of it is that part of that whole thing where you shortcut away from the consequences is by not taking responsibility. Mm-hmm. So when you can't own your own mistakes and live up to the consequences, you're never going to get that lesson, because until you realize that it was your mistake, how do you know what to fix? Right. So you're never going to, you really just signed yourself up for another ride on that same vicious cycle. And next time it comes around, it's going to be with interest.
1,000%.
So you really are doing yourself a huge disservice. Just man up, own the mistake, figure out what you should do different next time, bite the bullet and get on with it.
I love the thing about taking shortcuts from other people's experience. I had this I was listening to John Maxwell. And he was right. And he's all about, like, he would like spend money to go to different people and coaches and this and that. And he had this guy on here, Don Yeager. He's like a sports guy. He's a sports writer. And Don Yeager was saying how he has these opportunities to do these different interviews. And when he was a kid, he was telling his dad, I want to go out and do this thing. And his dad said, make sure you carve out in those interviews, you're going to be meeting with these top performers. Make sure you carve out at least one question for yourself. You ask them, and then you get that wisdom. And so then he wrote a book, I think recently, basically all of those over the years, all those interviews, all the answers to that question. I think his question was, what is the habit that you do that set you apart from everyone else? Something like that. But I think the point is, he has all of this wisdom, this compounded wisdom. It's all compounded into just this one question. Like, what is the thing? And the only way that you can really take that shortcut, I mean, if you sit across from somebody who's been doing what you want to be doing, and they have 50 years of experience on you, you get the benefit of direct, like, all right, yes, good. What can I get out of this person? That's like, how can I compress 50 years of experience into one conversation? And that's the beauty of, when you're open, you do have that humility. Okay, I know less than this guy. What can I learn from him? And I think having that attitude of teachability, humility, that's the way to get there. That's the only way you can take that shortcut. And then you have to still do the work.
Correct. And that's what brought the three of us together, right? Had we not had that mentality, Jonathan Beasley and I would have never joined Jake and Gino, never ponied up that $20,000 to learn from other people's mistakes and knowledge along the way. And we would never be where we're at now. So, but like you said, you still have to take the action afterwards. So 100% agree with you there. That's the shortcut to life. If you want it, is learn from others' mistakes and their knowledge so that you don't have to learn it all firsthand.
Yes, yeah, and there's a special lesson that comes with getting your ass beat on a piece of real estate. It only takes one before you are just so determined not to let it happen again. And I can attest to that because Isaac and I are trying to partner up on some stuff, and he is a tough underwriter. Like he will make sure that he understands the deal implicitly before, we're putting pen to paper and just throwing out offers willy-nilly. And after hearing your story, I'm sure that your experience has a lot to do with that.
For sure. And then, and sometimes that can also haunt you, right? So you have to figure out how to take the lesson and get all the learnings from it, but don't let it cripple you, because it can bend you past that point of constructive and to where you jade yourself and you miss opportunities in the process, right?
So Isaac, take me from Uncle Jonathan. I know you're kind of asking the questions here, but how do we kind of bridge the gap from college to where you are today? Tell me a little bit about that in between.
Yeah, so from there. I'm very systemic and everything, right? And so I got through that point and I filed that note away. Hey, I like real estate. There's potential there. And meanwhile, I continued to grow my career in operational management for the rail industry. And moved around a lot, and I was unwilling to travel 75% of the time, right? And that's really what was needed for my role to continue to grow, is you had to sell your soul and be on the road. And I had signed up to have a wife and a family, so I was like, no, I'm not going to be that guy. And I felt like at the end it would all balance out if I were a few million short in my 401k compared to kids that didn't know me and didn't appreciate me. I would rather have the kids than I would the extra money. But it always bothered me that I had to choose between the two. In reality, I felt like I should never have to sell myself short of my full potential just so I could have a happy family life. So eventually I came to terms with figuring that out. So I finished the degree in 2019, cash flowed it, paid my own way through. So a non-traditional student, right? That's fairly recently. And then once the degree was done, I was like, all right, the degree is done. I can check that list off.
Man, I can't get past that comment, dude. We got to back up. You didn't want to sell yourself short so that you could have a happy family life. Like, did I hear you say that correctly?
Yeah.
Like, dude, I got to unpack that because that's interesting.
Yeah. That's a good catch. So I don't think that anytime that you have to back down your goals to fit within another goal, you're on the wrong path. So I knew that even though my employers had been really good to me and I had been good for them, I knew it was a lopsided relationship. I was better for them than they were for me because our goals competed with each other, right? They conflicted with each other. I wanted to do less and get more, and they wanted me to do more and get less. And so in return, how could you ever be fulfilled that way? And at the same time, why should I take my life and my full potential and sideline it and stay down there where I had been for that decade, far below my potential, just so that I could be at home every night with my family? So you have to figure out, at some point you have to decide you can have security, but it's not really security anyways, right? Or you can just go ahead and step off of that and say, okay, this isn't working. I know I can fend for myself. Let's go try something different. I tried something different. I'd been courting a company for 4 or 5 years that I knew the company in and out. My degree landed me exactly where I needed to be with my experience to get in the door. So I did. Got in there. It was the most miserable 9 months of my life. And everything, it wasn't that they were a bad company. It was just that everything that makes me who I am, the work ethic and the self-starter and all that type of stuff, actually worked against me in that environment. So, I had pivoted out of something that I had full control of and tons of security into something that, like I said, you have to make a choice. You don't know everything. You get as much knowledge as you can, and then it's time to commit and bail. Just jump for it, and you'll figure out the rest along the way. So I did. And for 9 months, I regretted my choice, but I got some really good lessons there. And in the process, I was like, all right, this isn't it, but there is something out there that is a better fit, and I'm going to start working towards that. So during that 9-month process, I had already started working on real estate. So my real estate journey looked more along the lines of 2020. I graduated 3 months before, in December of 19, and I said, hey, I've got the capacity now. I've been cash flowing college about $1,000 a month is what it took out of my monthly budget as a single income family of 4. That's a lot of money. So that had paid for school. I couldn't have any other focuses at that time. I had to have that singular focus to get that across the finish line. But once that was done, I was like, all right, now I can spread myself back out again. So jumped into real estate. I knew I wanted to get into it. Went to the typical bigger pockets journey like most of us did. And got there and realized I didn't want anything to do with single family houses. I wanted to go straight to multifamily. So I bought a 4-unit property. Nice. And it took me a year and 5 properties under contract to find one that really met the numbers on paper. So I got across the finish line and I said, hey, I'm going to use this in my little sandbox environment where I can test everything out on a small scale. And if I still like it when I'm done dealing with the ugliest duckling in town in the worst case scenario, then I'll commit even further. Right. So I bought this property and closed on it in November of 2020, C-class asset, ugly duckling, ugly tenants. I mean, everything. If you want to learn a lesson, you don't find the pretty one. You find the ugly one. That's where you're going to find your lesson.
That's a good one. That's good.
I did that, and I put $60,000 into it, and upped the gross rent by about 30% during that time. And I still have it to this day. I'm probably going to get rid of it this year. But I learned my lessons. Pretty much everything transfers from that 4-unit property over to large scale multifamily, other than the evaluation method. Everything else is true. I fired my property manager 6 months in and replaced him. I did a whole bunch of other stuff. Yeah. So I learned all my lessons there, and then I was ready for Jake and Gene. I was like, I'm not going to go spend 20 grand to learn the basics. I'm going to go spend 20 grand to get the high level stuff. And if I don't have the basics when I go in the door, then I paid 20 grand to learn the basics. I mean, that's a misappropriation of my funds, right? So,
right. That's good, man.
How did you jump to multifamily? Because for me, that was quite a process. And I see it a lot happening with Jake and Gino or these other communities where you're rubbing elbows with guys that are buying apartment assets. But how did you get there from the outset?
Because I was doing the math in the back of my head, and it really, I mean, our goals adapt over time, right? My goal was to replace my monthly income. And so when I looked at it, I was like, well, man, on average, single family houses and a buy and hold long-term rental, people are happy to get $150 a door of cash flow out of that. Well, I mean, that's a lot of houses to replace that income. I was like, I'm going to be working for a long time just to get there. I was like, it makes no sense. Or I can spend the same amount of time looking for a 4-unit property and get 4 times what my return was off that same amount of effort. So I was already looking for the efficiency there.
So it's just kind of inherent with your personality as an operations guy. You see the efficiency, like you said. It's kind of like, it seems like that's your personality, just kind of like, well, just straight numbers, you have 4 units versus 1, if you're going to get 4 units at one closing versus 1 unit, 1 closing, or whatever, fill in the blank, 1 roof, 4 units, all the reasons that multifamily makes more sense than single family. Just for you, it kind of seems like that was just your personality just to go there.
Yeah, it was. And God really did me a service in the fact that he did me a favor in the fact that the other 3 properties I was buying at the same time didn't go across the finish line as well, because had they gone across, I would have been drinking more from the fire hydrant than I could handle. I mean, I would have succeeded with it, but it would not have been in a positive way. It probably would have given me a little bit more of a negative impact from that. So I got this 1 4-unit across the finish line, and learned a ton, man. I learned that when I underwrote it, I never modeled out the cash injection that it was going to take as I repositioned it. Picking up a property that had tons and tons of deferred maintenance over the years, that's expensive when you turn those units.
I'm in the middle of learning that lesson right now. Right now I'm in the middle of a 5-unit portfolio. It's a duplex and a triplex. And it's funny. That's the same exact scenario. I'm like, man, if I had just known that it was going to be this much for each turnover and known that vacancy was going to be as much. I mean, you look at the T12 from the previous, property management company, you look at it like, oh, good. They're running like a 5% vacancy rate. And now I'm like, why am I running it like 80% for the last 9 months? Like, how does that, how does that make any sense? But same sort of thing. It's like, if I had just, and I think Jake and Gino talk about it a lot when I listen to their stuff, they say, listen, make sure you have an exit plan. Make sure you have a strategy in place, and then you execute that strategy. You don't want to go into something blind, just thinking, oh, well, I'm just going to figure. I mean, your first deal, you are kind of figuring it out. It's kind of like kindergarten, like you're saying.
Right.
But as you become more sophisticated, you have that experience, you get your butt handed to a couple of times. You're like, wow, all right, next time I'm going to make sure I have my reserves. I'm going to make sure I know exactly what those CapEx items are going to be, and what they're, what the life is going to be in that, whatever, the HVAC or the roof or whatever, fill in the blank. But what I love is what you talk about, is when you said the models or the systems, they work on a smaller scale, but you scale them up. Like, it's the same process, it's the same procedures, it's just on a bigger scale, but it's the same concepts for the smaller properties, as it is for the bigger ones. How long between the first deal or whatever, that 4-unit, and your next bigger sort of thing?
So I bought that in November of 2020. I closed on that, and then end of April of 21, I joined Jake and Gino. And so at that point, I the same process that we just discussed that got me to a 4-unit instead of a single family. In the back of my mind, when I finally got that 4-unit across the finish line, I was like, there's no way I'm not doing this same process, taking 6 to 9 months to find another 4-unit. So automatically, before I joined Jake and Gino in March, I offered on a 12-unit right away by myself. And just looking at it and started getting that mindset. I already knew I couldn't continue. I couldn't scale up even with what I had done with the 4-unit. I had to go bigger to make the numbers work. Gotcha. So then I got to Jake and Gino and joined that at the end of April. And then the rest, they say, is history, right, as far as that goes. So like you said, though, for both of us, had we never jumped in on that first property, we would have never learned the lessons that we learned. So you have 2 ways of learning, like we said earlier. You jump off the fence and you take a little beating on your way down, and you learn some stuff, and you never land that way again in the future. Or you go sign up or mentor underneath somebody else by adding value to them or paying money for their the access to them or whatever. Right. And you get that knowledge in that way. But you have to learn those lessons. And there's only 2 ways to learn those lessons: either jump or go do something else. And I'm not saying jump and be careless in the process. Like I underwrote.
Still have to do the work.
Yeah. Right. You have to use some common sense there. It's not endorsing just plain stupidity by any means. But yeah, so that got me to Jake and Gino in April, and then really joined up. And during that same time frame, when I joined Jake and Gino, was also when I started the 9 months with that other job, that other company that was miserable. So as I joined Jake and Gino, I talked to somebody else, and I know this is going to sound super nerdy of me, and you'll have to forgive me, but I looked at it and I was like, man, I have 168 hours in the week. How many hours a week do I need to be able to put into Jake and Gino, into this multifamily stuff, to get my $20,000 in return? Yeah. Because I could go pay $20,000 for it and not have the time to get anything out of it, and it's going to suck. And 20 grand is a big number, right? You go tell your wife you're going to go spend 20 grand for a mastermind and see what happens, especially when you're that new in. And then, to be fair to my wife, I have the history of being an all-in guy. Like, I go all in on everything, 150%.
The reason I'm laughing, Isaac, is because I just had this conversation.
Dude, you didn't have the conversation. I had the conversation.
I did have the conversation, okay? Got the scars
he calls his uncle and is like, yo, I need you to pitch my wife on Jake and Gino, dude.
I don't know if this is going to make the cut, dude. I don't know. We'll have to. This might not end up on the final thing.
No, yeah. So, yeah, I totally feel your pain there. Been there. I didn't get my uncle to do it, but yeah, I had that conversation. So, no pun intended. You're a smart man to get somebody else in there to take it.
Exactly. That's actually, that's so funny. But yes, to bring it back, absolutely. When you go to your wife and say, hey, listen, I'm going to spend this on this thing. She asked the same question. She's like, okay, so what is that investment? What is that going to give us? And I think kind of like I'm more right brained. So I'm less like, it's going to give us this. Like, it's kind of like, I'm like, it's just going to work out. It's part of the experience, and we have to
believe in it. You got to feel
exactly right. And she's like, yeah, that's fine, but we only have so much to go, and what's going to happen with this. So I can relate to that.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, exactly. So same process. So I did the time study, and I looked and said, hey, if I sleep exactly 6 hours a night, and I mapped out my whole day, I can free up 15 hours a week. That's how much I can come up with after I work 60 hours and I spend time with the family and I do physical exercise and all that stuff. So I went to a Jake and Gino coach, somebody that I knew in the community that's my current accountability coach, Vince Gethings. He's the one that drew me to Jake and Gino. He didn't know this, but as I was looking at small multifamily properties, he was selling his so he could scale up into larger stuff. So I crossed paths with him, and I had mutual acquaintances with him and everything. So I went to him and I said, "Hey, Vince," he was getting out of the Air Force at the time. And I showed him my time schedule. He's like, "Dude, that's totally like what I would have done." But he's like, "Yeah," he's like, 15 hours a week, you can do it and you can get your money's worth out of it if you have other people who are going to match that effort, right? If you get teamed up with other people and their 15 hours in there, your 15 hours, then you can get somewhere. And then even with all that research, I still failed on one piece. And the one piece was 15 hours a week is 15 hours a week, but it matters where that time availability comes in at. So if you're working a 9-to-5 job and your 15 hours a week consists primarily of evenings and weekends, good luck, man, because brokers aren't going to wait around to take you out and look at a property on the weekend or after hours. You need to have some availability during that prime time in the day. And I didn't have that in that role, right? So fast forward, still run the multifamily, still show up to Dick and Gino events, still investing. I invested in 235 units during that time frame, but through different partnerships, and came out the other end of it. I've been networking, and that's a whole other story. But I came into this opportunity where I could jump into real estate full time. So basically, a job was not even posted yet, but an acquaintance reached out to me and said, "Hey, another investor is looking for a director of operations." He's like, "I know you'd be a slam dunk for it. I just didn't know if you're interested." So long story short, I looked at it. I didn't think there was any potential there because of conflict of interest and other things, but it actually worked out quite well. So I left the environment that I was at that was toxic and working against me, and I jumped in full force and manage his portfolio on a day-to-day basis now. And not only is it fulfilling because I get to use all my operational management experience in an environment that I love, but it's also, I get to do what I want to do full-time every day. Yes, it's not for me. Yes, I still have a salary cap. Yes, all those things are there, but everything that I do every day adds value to my dream as well as his, because anything I'm doing for him, I'm also doing for myself. So the benefits have been huge. And then it also has landed me a lot of credibility as I talk to other brokers and investors. You can say, "Hey, this isn't I'm not a weekend warrior here, man. I do this full time. This is the portfolio that I run. I can speak knowledgeably about all the stuff that we're talking about."
Isaac, can I ask you one quick question? Did you actively seek out that specific opportunity, or did it feel like it was kind of dropped in? Gosh, man.
I did not seek out. I'll tell you what I did do. I did not actively seek out that opportunity, and I never would have thought in a million years that it would have ever existed.
So how did it happen? Frankly, how did that happen?
My commercial lender, I had beers with him, and I built a relationship with him a little bit. And we went out, we kept up with each other over the time since they had loaned on the property, the 4-unit, right? And he said, "Hey, the type of stuff that you're into, you should really meet this guy, Wayne Hoffman. He's like, he's really big in this area and redevelopment and works with these different committees and stuff like that." And so I said, "Hey, sure, make the intro on the email. I'll follow up with it." So he introduced us on the email. And this is all back in the same time frame. So November of 2020, early 2021. And so I never actually met Wayne in person, but we always talked back and forth. And I would call him and say, "Hey, man, I just met this person, this person." He knew all the players in the game, right? So I could call him and say, "Hey, I just met this guy. What should I, should I steer clear of him? What do I need to watch for?" Right. And so we kind of paired things back and forth. And I raced against his wife in triathlons a couple times, so I knew who he was.
Dude, I'm a cyclist, man. We should another podcast. Another podcast,
man. We could go forever.
Who won those races, by the way, Isaac?
We paired. So she's faster than me. I'm gonna just put it real. We would pair up and on runs and stuff. I would be right there with her. But as far as she's a beast, she's just a whole other breed. Postpartum, 9 weeks postpartum.
And she's one of those.
Finish breastfeeding and go run that race and kick your butt.
I know that type.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyhow, Wayne, that was his wife, right? So then Wayne reaches out, and he's the one that told me about this other guy named Ryan, who I now work for. And I'd already met Ryan on Bigger Pockets because I started a RIA meeting in my local town as part of my educational journey through Bigger Pockets.
Nice.
So long story short, that's how it came to be. But the only thing that I had anything to do with on that, God gets full credit on it. I was genuine with the people that I was interacting with. And I learned a while back in my career that being transactional just kills you. So you could go out there and I wasn't being transactional intentionally. It wasn't like I was trying to be disingenuous, but I was so driven and I captured every essence of every minute of every day. I didn't waste any time. So in my mind, I always had this checklist running, and you fit somewhere in on my checklist. And so when I had a conversation with you, I literally had in my mind exactly what that conversation was supposed to look like to get that checked off my list. And then I was already moving forward to the next person. So in my mind, as you're still talking, mentally, I had already started changing gears and going the other way.
Yeah.
And it wasn't fair to the people that I interacted with. And it wasn't like I was trying to shortchange them, but in return, you would feel that. You would feel very much like you were on my checklist. And
Well,
so
there's a scripture that says whatever you've whispered in the darkness will be spoken on the rooftops, something like that.
yes,
Jesus said. It's the
yeah,
same
yeah,
concept.
yep,
It's the same principle. Whether people, it's going to come out one way or another. Basically, like from the heart, the
yeah,
mouth speaks. Whatever you're saying. So your
yes,
motivations have to start at a heart level. They have to be pure.
yes,
They have to be thinking about the other person on the other end. Because if they're not, you can't fake it. People, like you're saying, they catch on to that.
they feel that.
The
Yeah,
beauty is when you do have that right heart, you have that right perspective, you're thinking about the other person, that also comes through. And it's the whole thing, how do you get what you want? You help people get what they want, right? Zig Ziglar. Like
correct.
that's the thing, is it has to start at a heart. And when you approach relationships that way, inherently, like inevitably, they're going to want to help. Oh, he's such a salt of
Yes,
the earth sort of guy. He would give the
yep.
shirt off his back, whatever. But you have to be that. You have to be that guy first.
You can't fake that stuff. So yeah, I wasn't transactional at this point, and that worked in my favor. So I had built a relationship with the lender, with Wayne, and then I said, hey, I'll always look at it, right? So he introduced me to Ryan formally based on that job role and everything. Interviewed for it. Just showed up for the interview, not because I thought I was interested, not because I thought I wanted it. I honestly didn't think that I was interested, nor did I think I wanted it because of all the reasons I talked about. But I knew that I had relationships that had gotten my name in that hat, right? So I at least wanted to show up and interview and be respectful to the relationships. And then I was also very honest at the end of the interview. I said, hey, I just don't see, I think it would have to be like this, this, and this for it to be, even be a remote possibility for me. And I threw it all out there. It's like, this is what I'd have to have. I have to be able to chase my own deals and not have my hands tied, no conflict of interest, the opportunity to invest with you and access to you for mentorship when needed, and all those types of things. And he said, yes, 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 yes. And I was like, holy crap, what just happened?
That's amazing.
Yeah. But you have to be intentional. You have to know, like I told my wife when I was going to the interview, I said, I have to know what it would look like for this to be a win before I show up for that interview. Because when you're offered an opportunity and you don't have a clue what you actually want or where you're trying to go or what it would take to make it a success, you are a deer in the headlights and it shines through and you'll never know the opportunity, even if it cross paths with you. So it's one of those things, knowing all those things that it would take to make that a success, I was able to give that to him. And he was very genuine with it. I was like, hey, I respect you. You've accomplished a lot. And I respect the relationships that got us here. But this is what it would look like. And I told him, I said, I'm trying to work myself out of a job. I'm not looking for a job. So, and being genuine and putting myself out there and being vulnerable and ready for rejection and, knowing that more than likely that's what would happen because 90% of employers would not look favorably on everything that I had just said there, actually gave me the chance to find that win. Had I gone in there and handled it any differently, I would have never gotten to that point. So
the power of authenticity. Go ahead, Uncle John.
Yes.
It's such a good point. And the intentionality part too, man. I think so many people, if they had their own private genie in a bottle and had 3 wishes, most of them would take a minute to think about what it is that they want if they had infinite power at their fingertips. So
right.
if you don't know where you're going, any path will take you there. Right.
Correct.
So interested now at this point, speaking of clarity and intentionality, man, what is in the cards for you moving forward as it relates to like where you want to go in real estate? Like what's your next steps? Like what does life look like for you in the next year or two?
Yeah, that's a great question. The next 3 to 5 years, the plan is to transition out. So I've already started. When I came into the role that I'm in now, I told him one of my commitments was that I've always built a leadership team and transitioned them in behind me at every operation that I've been at before. So I would do the same thing for him. I was like, I'm never going to put you in second place. I said, I'll be results oriented. I'm going to make it all happen. You can't tell me when and where, but I will make sure that everything that you need is taken care of. I said, and part of that is going to be that when I transition myself out, I'll already have my replacement ready. I'll already have the processes. Everything will already be taken care of. So I've never made my employer feel second place on anything. I've always made sure that by having someone else and grooming someone else with you, you get quality of life and they get a chance to grow. And so that's the other perspective. When you actually invest in people, then it's no longer, I got to keep it next to my chest, man, because they could take this from me. It's like, that is so myopic. That is so scarcity driven. And it hurts you at the end of the day, because if you do that, you own all the trouble every single day. You have nobody to help you with it. So go ahead and enjoy it. It's all yours. But no, I made that commitment to him. And so as I'm going now, I'm already transitioning. I'm already writing processes for everything that I'm doing so that when that person and when I'm ready to start jumping, I don't have to start putting it all together. And you have to do it now. You have to do it ahead of time. But 3 to 5 years from now, I want to be doing it full time for myself. And then I'll consult with him. That was the agreement, that I could continue to consult with him at any given point, change over to a consultant instead of a W-2 so that I could be a true real estate professional, get that tax benefit and everything else in the process. So that's the plan. 3 to 5 years from now, not be doing it full time for him, do it full time for myself, maybe some consulting for him.
I have a question, and this comes actually out of morbid personal curiosity because you and I are talking about doing some stuff together. So I just want to know what are you capable of? Like, for real, like if you were like, I think I could do this. Like if the lid was off, like what are you capable of in real estate?
A lot more than I give myself credit for. I found that out. I'm really being authentic and more of a humble person also comes at a cost and limiting beliefs sometimes as well. Because you feel like, for me, let me just say for myself and not project on anybody else, but I feel like by saying what I think I'm capable of, or even framing that out in thought process, that I'm being arrogant and disingenuous and all these other things, right? Because that's how we're brought up. But I think the reality is that I like adding value to everybody that I interact with. Even my cold calls, I spend 30 minutes on the phone with the owner and I'll send them whatever I can help them with. That's just who I am. So I am that connector personality naturally, and that's who God created me to be. So I see that, plus my systematic approach and the experience that I'm able to get. I don't think there's really a cap on what I'm capable of necessarily. I think I'm always going to be choosing between the tipping point and value, right? So I'm doing all this so that I can have time with my family, choices that aren't framed out by dollar symbols on every single level, all these different things. And so I'm always going to be looking for that tipping point, because you can have whatever you want in life, but you can't have everything you want in life. You always have to choose between something. It doesn't matter what level you get to. You're always going to be choosing between one versus the other. We don't like thinking that way, but that's the reality. You can have whatever you want. You can't have it all. So I will always be looking for the tipping point between what I can create over here and what it facilitates me over here. I'm never going to go all real estate at the cost of my family and my life and other areas. I want that balanced approach across. And John and I have talked a lot. There's a book called The Tribe of Millionaires that came from the Go Abundance guys. I strongly recommend reading it. It's like a 2 or 3 day read at most. And it helps resonate, especially for somebody who's an all-in personality like me. You have to have, like, my dad's getting ready to pass right now. We talked about that. I saw him this morning. And when I look at him, I see so many successes and I see so many failures all at the same time, just like I would when I look at myself. It's not in no judgment towards him. Right. But when you get to the end of your life, how do you account for that 168 hours that you were given every week? How much of that did you spend in front of the TV? How much of that did you spend investing in other people that matter to you? Did you sit back and stay far back in your seat rather than scooching forward to the edge of your seat and jumping in with what your full potential was? So at the end of your life, that's what all of us should be asking ourselves. And I'm a Christian, so I also feel like I know that I'll be giving account to God when I get there for all the talents that he gave me and all those hours in the day that he gave me and all the 168 hours in the week. What did I do with them all? It's not just about you at the end of the day, right? It's about those that you come in contact with. So you could go to your grave as the richest person on earth, be a total prick, never have served anyone. And that little hyphen in between is going to be blank and empty. That's all it's going to matter. Nobody's going to remember you 40 years from now. Who cares about how rich you and famous you were when you didn't reinvest in anybody else? So that's where I'm at. Yeah, I know it's a long-winded question or answer to your question.
That was great. Go and do business with this until I return. That's what he says, Luke 27, I think. Just the parable of the minas. It's like, go do business with this. Go do business. Like, it's pretty clear. It's not like, what should I do? Figure it out. Go do something. Like, get to work.
By the way, the guy that buried it in the ground and did nothing was not praised. So,
exactly. Right. We have to be doing that. But it's like you're saying, at what cost? You don't want to be the guy that's taking advantage of people or just thinking about yourself. He's giving you I love how you put it, what are you doing with your 168 hours? Because we all have the same amount of time. It's a matter of what you do with that. And that dash, like, that's everything that we do. That dash doesn't even matter. It's today. It's right here, right now. Everything that we've ever done. I'm driving to my daughter's dance class today. And I'm sitting there and I was like a little irritated and just, like, we've got 4 kids and everything's just crazy. His life's looked like hectic. And I'm sitting there driving to dance and I'm like, all of the decisions that I've made have brought me here. It's like, that's
Right.
how I kind of felt like, is this where I want to be right now? And I get it.
Sometimes that makes you feel so small, doesn't it?
It's like, but it's like you were saying earlier, Isaac, you have to be able to take responsibility for, and I love
Yes.
that I could take my girls to dance. I think that's great. It's everything, but it's just the principle is that, like, listen, the decisions that you make, you've been given a certain thing. What do you do with that? And you have that purview to make the decision to I don't want to say just be with the family, but to spend time with your family and stay there. Yeah. And you have the purview to do this other thing, and you have some leeway. It's not like you have to pick one or the other. You can't have both, but you have to find a way. Guys like us who like to go out there and, slay the bear, we want to go and do that thing, but you have to keep it in a good balance. Cause it's like, you could gain the whole world. You could do everything, but at the end of the day, what's going to really matter, and that whole concept of setting up, like with your job, you're like, listen, I'm going to set up some leadership that's in place. It's the same thing in life. Like when we raise our kids, we're looking at it not as like, when I spend time with my son, spend time with my daughters, and I tell them the stuff of life, even as a little kid, just basic stuff like, listen, love one another, care for your brother, all these things. And what I tell my wife is what we're doing right now, it's having impact for generations. Like hundreds of thousands of people can, until the Lord comes back, can be affected by the words we're speaking right now. And what we're doing, it's not some small thing. It's not some insignificant thing. You're not just doing dishes. You're not just sweeping the floor. Like what you're doing is having impact for generations, because they see these parents who love them, who care for them, and are spending time with them. And when they see, my son sees a dad who's going out there and working, trying to provide, and they see that. And as long as you're not the workaholic guy who's not there, they see somebody who's dedicated, somebody who doesn't want to just sit around and just play video games and watch TV, somebody who's reading books, listening to podcasts, getting up early, but what are you doing with those 168 hours? I love the concept there. I love how you put it.
Thanks, man. Thanks. Yeah. I totally resonate with you on that. Also, there's a verse in the Bible that says, if you gain the whole world and lose your soul, you still lost, right? So at the end of the day, you don't have to be spiritual. You don't have to be a person of faith. Everything that most people that are well-rounded, people that are trying to be good people, what they're shooting for mirrors the ethics, the values, and everything else that you see in the Bible as well. So they run in parallel, whether you choose to believe or not to believe, or whatever. That's inconsequential as far as this conversation goes. Right. But at the end of the day, you still have to balance out your time and your resources and everything, whatever those resources are.
Yeah, no doubt. And honestly, most of the values-led businessmen that I look up to most, it actually was never about the money. It was about money not being a variable.
Correct. Thank you. Yeah.
So it's an easy one to pick on. And a lot of people with a poverty mentality will be like, man, you're so money focused. But the reality is, no, we're just removing money from
the equation.
Yeah, it's not. I don't want it to be an equation, part of the equation.
Good stuff.
Isaac, if you weren't slaying it in real estate, which we all know you're going to, but once you have slayed that beast and your business is crushing it, what would you be doing otherwise? What would you spend your time doing if not for real estate?
Oh, man, I enjoy investing in other people. So making sure that other people don't have to learn things the hard way like I did. And then I'm really out there. I like doing fun stuff. So I want to live on a sailboat for 90 days. I want to go skydiving again. I want to run a 100-miler instead of a 50. I want to do, a bunch of different things. I'm a very action-oriented guy. So there's never been a shortage of things for me to do.
I like how the running 100. I like how you're like, I want to run 100 instead of just a 50. Like just two marathons,
a couple hundred instead of 100, whatever.
Awesome. Yeah, that's something.
What's your favorite food?
I just ate some Jamaican food for lunch. So growing up in Haiti and everything, Jamaican is about the closest thing I can find to what I had growing up. So I like that. And then the rest of the time I like breakfast food. Like I made a crate bar for my son's birthday party the other day and did about 45 crepes, and we had dessert crepes, breakfast crepes, lunch crepes, all in all. So I'm a foodie. I'll get out there. I enjoy cooking it, and then I enjoy eating it.
That's awesome. Good stuff.
I want to see him with a big Rastafarian set of dreads.
Ear washed and yellow. Yeah.
I was almost until I felt a little more comfortable. I was going to ask you to bust out the Creole at some point, because that's pretty sick. That like you could just bust it out. You're like, oh, like just like the rest of them.
I used to be able to. I have lost most of my vocabulary over 20 years. First job when I got back stateside was transferring calls from Haiti internationally for MCI, because I could use the language skill to transfer the calls in or whatever.
But not anymore. That's it?
Not
It's
anymore.
gone? Ah,
Yeah. Cell phones, man. Who needs calls to be transferred?
that's true.
We already kind of talked about where you want to go in the next few years. Michael, you want to hit the fourth one?
Yeah, the last one is, what do you know now that you wish you had known when you'd first gotten started? What do you know now that you wish you had known?
That's such a huge question.
That's why we saved it for last.
Yeah. The one thing that I wish that I had known back then that I know now would have been to learn from other people. If I had known before, in your young and dumb, immature years, that you should be paying attention to what your elders that are ahead of you and, emulating the people that have what you want. Those are probably the two things that I wish I knew then, because that would have totally changed my life trajectory way above and beyond anywhere I'm at now.
If you had, let me take it one step further. If you'd listened to those guys, what would you have done differently?
Done differently from there?
Yeah.
I would have started everything I'm doing now much sooner. I feel like I'm on the right path. And
add zeros earlier, right?
Yeah. I would have been, I could have cut out a decade of my life, honestly. And I could have been where I'm at now in my mid-20s instead of my late 30s.
That's amazing.
Yeah, wholeheartedly agree. I genuinely think if somebody had the vision for it and started when they were 20, just about anybody that wanted to be could be financially free by 30, like academically, if they just did it. And then moving it is the hard part. Cool, man. Isaac, you're a rock star, dude. I'm looking forward to our future, man. I'm pumped, man. You're, telling a guy that he's smart is like telling a girl that he's hot, kind of a deal. So like, you're super smart, but you're good to your core, which is awesome. I've met a lot of dudes that are very brilliant that are extremely transactional. So the fact that you had the character to sort of size yourself up and like know that about yourself and make those changes speaks huge volumes. I see you in the community all the time, and I see how you interact with our pods, and you're always seeking to serve the other guys. And man, I really appreciate you. We quickly became friends. Thanks for coming on the podcast today. I learned something from you every time we interact, and I just really appreciate it.
Likewise.
Isaac, I love the just some of those nuggets and words of wisdom. I kind of like to bring it full circle. I'm just thinking about your story and everything that you've gone through, in your early years, and then even taking those lessons into your middle years, and now where you are today. Just in an hour, I've been able to see kind of that story come out. You know what I mean? And those lessons, those are those little lessons, like, the only shortcut to life is learning lessons from other people. That's a lesson that is like, that's a big lesson that, me last year through like a year of journaling, like, and reflecting on my year, like that was one of the lessons that I learned is like, if you just learn from other people, but like you're rattling them off. One, next.
Yeah, but we just condensed 39 years or at least 31 years into 1 hour. So I'm rattling it off, but it took me years to learn that same lesson.
There you go. And that's it. What I love is that you have done the work, you are doing the work, and you're the type of guy where that's who does you just do the work. And I love that. It inspired me today. Thank you for that, Isaac. That was good.
Yeah. Thank you for the time. You guys are actually the first podcast interview. That was on my goal for this year, was be on at least 3 podcasts.
The Evergreen Real Estate Podcast. Evergreen Real Estate.
Oh, exactly. How could you do better?
Good stuff.
Cool, man.
I love it.
Perfect mini. Dude, I appreciate you guys. And Michael, you want to take us out of here?
Beautiful. All right, Isaac. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. Until next time, this is the Evergreen Real Estate Podcast, episode number 2. Thank you for coming. Please share with your friends, share with your family, add value to the next person. Take care.